Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our weekly Sunday meeting. This is our 99th consecutive meeting on all things COVID. So, as usual, we would be discussing, about COVID and everything that is happening around it. And then we will be moving on to talking about mitochondrial dysfunction. We have our speaker, Dr. Nidhi Dhawan, with us, who's been managing these sessions and who's been conducting these sessions very brilliantly with us. So I would like to call upon Dr. Nidhi Dhawan, the Secretary of IMA and NDB, and the Associate Medical Director of ENT and Head of the Safety Committee in Shroff Charity Eye Hospital in Daryaganj, to come forward and please conduct this session and give us that much needed COVID update. Over to you, Dr. Nidhi.
Thank you so much, Dr. Meenakshi. And thank you very much for not calling me the guest speaker today.
So that was in the beginning, but yes.
Yeah. We will, in view of what has gone down in the last week or so, discuss a little bit about COVID. Then we will take a loaded topic, briefly touch upon ivermectin, and come to mitochondrial health. So let's not waste any time and start. It looks like we are living on the pages of a history book. जिस इतिहास की किताब के पन्नों पर हम पैर जमाए हुए आज बैठे हैं और जो हम आज कह रहे हैं, सुन रहे हैं, चल रहे हैं, that is going to be read, thought, and lived by our coming generations. So it is our duty that we set the facts scientifically straight and that we take the responsibility that our voice doesn't get lost. With these Sunday morning sessions, even if it is a little voice, at least it is out there in the universe and will be recorded for somebody to see. As of this weekend, this is the New York Times report of the average daily cases per 100,000 people. If you look at Australia, you look at parts of Europe, and you look at Canada, these are the high incidence areas. Parts of Asia, Far East, parts of South America, which are now sort of medium to moderate areas. But look at the map and see the places like Mexico. See for the want of a better word, the river blindness or the ivermectin belt, and see large swaths of Asia. These are the places where the case counts are low. The big three, you see, for the sake of comparison, I'm putting these big three here. We are the biggest country in terms of population. And UK is the smallest. Yes, they could be testing more. Yes, we could be reporting less. But there are other things which are going on here that the West is ignoring. Adding Israel and South Korea to the mix, adding Singapore to the mix, you see how Israel has, the smallest country, got the maximum number of cases around the end of February or the beginning of April. But even that has now come down. Showing a little uptake, going down again. So the vaccination, doesn't seem to prevent infection. It does prevent severe disease and death, and we will see that in the coming slides, but it doesn't prevent infection. South Korea, a flat line throughout the last 2 years of the pandemic, and just see how it has climbed. And now South Korea is also coming down. So evidently, the virus doesn't care that you have a zero COVID policy. South Korea, unfortunately, because of its zero COVID policy, had a large naive population and also suffered somewhat in the Omicron wave, which has not caused too much suffering in the rest of the world. If you look at the daily new confirmed deaths per million, you see India is way down here. Israel going up, coming down, going up, coming down, but now close to the baseline. US, finally, the deaths have started coming down, which is an encouraging sign. UK, there seems to be this thing about, whether it is a sawtooth pattern, which is coming down, going up. So this is something that we have to watch. It seems to be showing a slight uptick. We don't know whether this is with COVID or because of COVID. Apparently, nearly 60 to 65% of cases documented with COVID are incidentally found to be with COVID. They have other pathologies that require them to reach the hospitals. If you look at the big three, deaths and hospitalizations are comprehensively down in the US and India, but both these countries have been showing a going up, coming down sort of curve in terms of the number of cases. UK is comprehensively showing a coming down of the number of cases, but the deaths seem to be creeping up a little bit and quite steeply. If you remember a few weeks ago, we talked about that computer game in which you could, infect the whole world and there could be a delay death button. So we don't know what's happening here, but this is something that we need to follow a little more closely. South Korea, if you see, this seems like a clear downward trend in deaths. Israel seems like a clear downward trend in deaths, even though there are patchy, sawtooth parts of the graph. Looking at the vaccination status of the world, nearly 65% of the world population has received at least one dose of the vaccine, and nearly 60% is fully complete with the initial protocol of 2 doses. The countries which are doing well in the vaccination, Singapore, China, are the countries which are also not entirely free of COVID, despite China's zero COVID strict lockdown policy. Omicron doesn't care whether it is BA1, BA2, XE, or any of the new emerging 3, 4, 5 variants. Of concern, and this is something that I don't have any data access to, so can't say, but I'm going to not stop looking. Of concern is, what does China know that we don't? I mean, is it just politics? Why are they imposing such strict lockdowns? Is population welfare at the center of that? Because clinical data from the rest of the world doesn't seem to be scary any longer. The Reuters graphs and animations that tell us how lockdowns have really worked through the pandemic If you look at Israel, it is about 7% of its peak and it's falling. There are about 420 infections per 100,000 people in the last 7 days. The graphs are very clear that the deaths are no longer a matter of concern. But look at this. Despite a lockdown requiring closing of some sectors in the economic framework of the country, Omicron peak did happen. The lockdown did not prevent that. Look at India, which is now at less than 1% of the peak and falling. Even though in some cities like Delhi, we are now seeing an uptick, and it is something that we need to follow in the coming week to 10 days. But you see here, we locked down when we saw the curve going up, and we unlocked when we saw the curve coming down or flattening. We locked down when we saw the initial surge, and then we had limited lockdowns for some time. And then we recommended closing. We recommended population to follow logic. But now there are practically no lockdown measures. Despite that, the Omicron peak has been lower than the Delta peak. UK had very strict lockdowns at the time of their Omicron peak. They have limited lockdowns, but now they are saying absolutely no lockdowns, open up fully. Their deaths went up, came down. This sawtooth needs to be followed more closely. The case counts seem to be coming down comprehensively. So this is about 13% of their peak caseload and falling. If you remember the last slide, India's caseload was less than 1% of the peak. And of course, our peak was very big, no doubt about it. Looking at US, as of 5:30 Friday evening, US was at 5% of the peak and rising. But that rise is not very sharp. It is something that you need to follow over the next few days to weeks. They seem to be having a BA2 or a mixed BA3, 4, 5 surge. The good thing about this surge is that the deaths are definitely down. But again, lockdowns did not stop Omicron. Coming to India, this number of new cases being slightly more than the 7-day average is a matter of concern and needs to be followed a little bit more closely. But as we were discussing a little while ago, a virus or any pathogen is harmful when our body is not educated about it, does not recognize it, and mounts an inappropriate or inappropriately long response to it. Over the last 2 years, we have played the Red Queen game with the virus. Sometimes the virus has been up, sometimes we have been up. But the good thing is that we are not just in the same place as we were 2 years ago. The human immune system, whether by accident or design, whether by vaccination or infection, has begun to recognize the virus. So we are seeing less and less acute cytokine storm-like situations. We are seeing milder disease. We are seeing disease, no doubt about it, but in less and less number of people. It seems to be a function of how much your body is able to recognize the virus and what response it mounts according to your immune capability, which is where the mitochondrial health will come into play. And we'll get into that a little while into this presentation. So as of 16th April, 8 p.m., we still vaccinated about 11 lakh 30,000 people. The testing was still at about 3 lakh. The cases across the country were showing a small uptick of about 175, of which majority are in Delhi. There were 4 deaths, which again is details need to be seen whether it was with COVID or because COVID. But this is, and a single death is also one too many. But this is something that needs to be watched over the next few days and weeks. Of interest is that of all the states and cities, Mumbai seems to be the only city which has implemented a sewage screening program. And we need to rock the authorities to start doing that for our city also. India's active case load is less than 15,000. Even that slight uptick hasn't taken it higher than 15,000, and we are kind of very close to the baseline. Looking at Delhi, and this is what we need to see, as of 9th of April, the case counts were 160 against a 7-day rolling average of 127. But you see the 7-day rolling average has also risen in Delhi, which means that the rise is consistent. And we need to be mindful. We need to continue personal protection rather than government control. And I personally feel like, whatever makes sense. So we are in our hospital now, when we see somebody who's not wearing a mask and we tell them that please wear your mask, this is a hospital, we are told अब तो government ने कह दिया कि mask पहनने की जरूरत नहीं है. So government is not going to tell you what is logical and how you should live your life. You will have to take responsibility not only for your own health, but of the health of people who depend on you and who come to you for health reasons also. This becomes a duty-bound thing. Interestingly, Mumbai has a little better equation. Maharashtra has a little better equation. Their new cases are less than their 7-day average. And Kerala is doing the best. I mean, I just had to have this because 0 new cases is a milestone that we need to clap Kerala for. Despite their earlier, numbers, this is fantastic. Looking at Uttar Pradesh, again, that 7-day average 32 to 52, new cases 28 to 108. So a consistent rise, and something that we need to be mindful of, something that we need to be watchful of, but something that does not need to trigger anxiety in us, because as I said, our bodies are getting educated, and the pathology is not devastating, not causing rampant hospitalization or ICU admission. We are going to see an upsurge of what we call long-term or extended symptoms. Whoever this is, Galaxy Note 8, please mute your mic. Galaxy Note 8, please mute your mic. We are going to see an upsurge of long COVID, extended COVID, autoimmune diseases, and even perhaps malignancies. And we have to be mindful of who comes to us and what symptoms we need to investigate in what manner. That is our responsibility and duty. I do want to revisit ivermectin in view of the Together trial. I feel like the Together trial does not really have it together. And I'm going to only present scientific facts and allow you all to decide what you want to do with this molecule. This is as of May 2020, an Elsevier article which calls it a broad spectrum antiviral, a peer-reviewed paper. And it says it is a FDA approved broad spectrum antiviral. Of interest is that, and we've known this for a long time, important alpha beta is blocked by ivermectin. It dissociates the alpha and the beta 1 units so that the viral genome cannot enter the nucleus. This is important. Alpha beta transports the intracytoplasmic genome into the nucleus. Ivermectin has been proven, and not just now, but proven to be effective in inhibiting dengue virus, West Nile virus, Zika virus, which are all major burdens of human health. And I'm not saying that. This paper in Elsevier is. This is as of 12th of June, 2020. If you look at the pharmacology of ivermectin, you find that it has a broad spectrum of activity against several pathogens. It is antimicrobial, it is antiparasitic, and it does have some antiviral activity. Not only does it block important alpha beta, but it also blocks CD147 and ACE2 attachment with viral proteins. Dr. Vinay, आपका mic mute कर दें, please. Sapna, if you could mute everybody else, please. Thank you. So ivermectin in the past, and ivermectin has been in use for more than 3 decades now. In the past, it has been found to be inhibitory to both RNA and DNA viruses. Among the RNA viruses, it has been shown to be inhibitory against Zika, dengue, yellow fever, West Nile, Hendra, Newcastle, chikungunya, avian influenza, and to a degree, even against HIV-1. In the DNA viruses, it has been found to be inhibitory. And I'm not saying it is cidal, I'm saying it is inhibitory against equine herpes zoster 1. It is BK polyoma virus inhibitory, pseudorabies virus inhibitory, and bovine herpes zoster 1 inhibitory. not only is it anti-pathogenic, it is also immunomodulatory in the host. So it causes activation of neutrophils, induces CRP activation,
Hello.
and induces IL-6 production also. Ivermectin also inhibits proliferation of cancer cells. It also affects glucose and cholesterol metabolism in the cell. It works on several receptors, among which CD147 is relevant, P2XX4, which is an ATP-gated cationic channel, which is relevant. Now, the P2X4 is gated by extracellular ATP, and the positive allosteric modulation of this channel enhances secretion of CXCL5. If you remember, we did one talk a few months ago where CXCL5, which is also raised in HIV, and we said that anti-HIV medicines work in controlling the inflammation in COVID also. And nuclear factor kappa beta, we know, is one of the target sites of ivermectin. We have been knowing this for a long, long time. So the key effect of ivermectin has been inhibition of nuclear important alpha beta activity, but it is also an ionophore, which changes the ionic environment intracellularly, increasing chloride influx into the cell and making it more cationic. It has anti-inflammatory effect by reducing by immune cell recruitment and cytokine production. It allosterically modulates the P2X4 receptor, and it activates glutamate-gated chloride channels in nerves and muscles of parasites. In larger mammals, it does not enter the central nervous system, so it doesn't cause any of the neural effects here. And that is why in patients with Parkinsonism or in extremes of age, we do not recommend ivermectin. Interestingly, ivermectin also blocks oncogene activation through the AR-EGFR signaling pathway. It improves outcomes through the HSP27 pathway. It binds the phosphorylation pocket of HSP27 to inhibit the stress-mediated phosphoactivation and depolymerization of HSP27, which is oncogenic. This again is in viruses as of 2021, August 2021, effect of ivermectin and atorvastatin on nuclear localization of important alpha beta and drug target expression profiling. Now, they carried out this study in specifically COVID patients, COVID-19 patients. The effect on important alpha beta heterodimer is well documented. Everywhere they are calling it FDA approved drug ivermectin. I'm not saying this, paper is. The antiviral activity has been shown in all these viruses. A largely antiparasitic drug has significant antiviral, anti-cancer, antibacterial, and antiparasitic activity, has been shown to be safe over the last 30-35 years. In the river blindness belt, COVID-19 has not caused as much havoc, despite there being an ongoing endemic presence of HIV and low availability of high-grade medical facilities. The both the statin and ivermectin prevent triggering of nuclear factor kappa beta, at least in these patients that they have studied. They are saying this. Ivermectin is a well-known anti-helminthic drug with reported antiviral activity against these viruses. And among the pleiotropic effects on virus-infected host cells, it is capable of interfering with important alpha-beta mediated nuclear transport, thus inhibiting the import of viral proteins into the nucleus of the cell. This reduces viral replication. You will find what you want if you look hard enough. आप उसकी आंखें खोल सकते हो जिसकी आंखें बंद हो. अगर आंखें खुली रख के हम देखने से मना कर दें, तो उससे बड़ा गुनाह हम नहीं कर सकते. Looking at mitochondrial health and disease pathogenesis. SARS-CoV-2 itself has brought mitochondria into a sharp focus in the last year or so. We have seen that COVID has higher mortality in people who have comorbid conditions or who are beyond a certain age, 65 in some countries, 60 in some countries, which is one of the reasons where I think India has been scoring against the rest of the world, because a large swath of our population is young. Particularly, this mortality and morbidity has been high in people with metabolic syndrome, obesity, and diabetes mellitus. The association of both COVID, serious disease, and of metabolic dysfunction, diabetes, and obesity is related with altered immune response and a higher degree of cytokine storm. It is expected by the present figures that nearly 22% of the world population is at risk for severe disease. That is about 1.7 billion people, because this is the prevalence of metabolic syndrome, diabetes, and obesity. It appears like there is a failure of resolution of inflammation in these people, and there is both an increased innate immune response as well as a failed or blunted adaptive immune response. Now, this could be age-related, but it is also associated with these metabolic dysfunctions. This has been called inflammaging. That inflammation is causing aging. So it's not your chronological years which tell your body's age. It's the level of inflammation in the body that is your actual biological age. Inflammaging is associated with T-cell immunosenescence. It's associated with thymic atrophy, T-cell exhaustion, and increased inflammatory cytokines and chemokines. The physical and cardiorespiratory parameters in people with inflammation are deranged, and including a little bit of activity of any sort improves health and fitness and decreases the inflammatory markers and could become a preventive or protective strategy. So why are we talking about inflammaging and how does fitness and health come into the equation. अगर आप एक अर्बन मॉडर्न लाइफस्टाइल में रह रहे हो तो आप धूप में कम निकलते हो, आप लार्जली एक एयर कंडीशनड कमरे में बैठे रहते हो और बैठे रहते हो. So sedentary lifestyle removes the need for the body to activate its homeostatic mechanisms. जब तक हम उथल पुथल नहीं मचाएंगे तब तक बॉडी उस उथल पुथल को सेटल करने के लिए कोई काम नहीं करेगी. अगर हम उस सिस्टम को थोड़ा बहुत हिलाएंगे नहीं तो वो ट्रिगर नहीं मिलेगा कि बॉडी एक एंटी इन्फ्लेमेटरी एक्टिविटी इनिशिएट करे. एंड दिस इज अ फेलियर ऑफ हॉर्मेसिस. दिस ऑल्सो causes accelerated aging. इसीलिए हम देखते हैं कि गांव में शायद मेटाबॉलिक सिंड्रोम कम है. This is associated with increased altered macrophages, altered T cell homeostasis, and increased inflammatory markers. Exercise is the adaptation response towards better hormetic control. Exercise is associated by decelerated aging and anti-inflammation. और एक्सरसाइज और हेल्थ के बीच में जो की लिंक है, that appears to be mitochondrial adaptation. आप अगर थोड़ा सा माइटोकॉन्ड्रिया को स्ट्रेस करो तो माइटोकॉन्ड्रियल फंक्शन इंप्रूव होता है. And by improving mitochondrial function, you are able to improve ATP availability, you're able to improve longevity, and you're able to improve muscle health. Muscle health improve होने से कुछ myokines release होती हैं like irisin, which not only protect the mitochondria, but they also protect the lungs against reperfusion injury. They enhance an anti-inflammatory adipocyte morphology, and they modulate and downregulate the ROS in macrophages. So aging is a function of rising intracellular oxidative stress rather than chronological time. जो मेलाटोनिन की हमने बात की थी कुछ हफ्ते पहले, it exerts its antioxidant action via several mechanisms, including but not limited to CD147. And this protects the mitochondria. If you remember, we referred to CD147 even in the context of ivermectin. So even ivermectin protects the mitochondria and will downregulate inflammation in long-term usage. Melatonin exerts its antioxidant action via several mechanisms, and we had touched upon those mechanisms earlier. So persistent antigenic stimulation, जो हमने last week we had referred to it because we have realized that antigen antibody complexes can be internalized by non-ACE2 immune cells like macrophages and monocytes, causing these cells to get infected and a persistent antigenic stimulation to happen in the body. The exhausted T cells that result from this overstimulation are associated with decreased oxidative phosphorylation, so decreased availability of ATP, loss of mitochondrial function, so increased aging, increased ROS, so increased oxidative damage. And all this is happening despite increased cell-free glycolysis. So there is also a disordered glucose metabolism. It looks like mitochondrial dysfunction is the first documentable, findable, chemical change in the body. So mitochondrial dysfunction precedes pathology by good many weeks. And not only the rest of the body, smooth muscle, skeletal muscle, heart muscle, gut, but also immune cells, T cells and monocytes display altered mitochondrial markers long before the effects of the pathology are visible clinically. Mitochondrial health is directly related with disease freedom and longevity. And Nick Lane proposed the double agent theory that pathogen and oxidative stress together seem to be causing the aging. So SARS-CoV-2, like many other viruses, hijacks the immunometabolic system. The Warburg-like shift is when the glycolysis is increased and when the oxidative phosphorylation is decreased. So glycolysis तो increase हो रहा है, लेकिन ATP decrease हो रहा है. Available ATP for carrying out metabolic functions of the body is getting decreased. This causes an imbalance in the cytokines and the interferons and is ultimately responsible for activation of both the nucleofactor kappa beta pathway and the NLRP pathway. The NRF2 activation can happen again, resulting in apoptosis and early cell death. So this is a very tightly controlled system where our body is trying to, that Red Queen hypothesis, our body is trying to fight the infection that it is encountering. It is resulting in some metabolic dysfunction, and we are rapidly going downhill. So the one thing which is under our control is to not let our metabolism be hijacked. The road less traveled. Why am I saying that? Because हम लोग ना एक automatically जो हर रोज करते हैं वही करते जाते हैं, और वो उस चींटी की तरह जो चीनी उठाती है और चलती रहती है, चलती रहती है, चलती रहती है, हम चलते रहते हैं. But it is possible to induce mitochondrial biogenesis, and it's very easy to do so. Just moving a little every day is all it takes. So synthesis of new mitochondria rescues the mitochondrial mass. It prevents shortening of telomeres, which are a sign of aging. The process is finely regulated by PGC1 alpha and its interaction with several transcription factors. These transcription factors actually regulate the mitochondrial DNA replication and transcription. अगर PGC gene की deficiency हो या deletion हो, it has been experimentally found that there is no change in the baseline expression of mitochondria, but the stress response is not mounted and aging is accelerated. So what does exercise do? Exercise improves endothelial function. Exercise in the short term is the triggered inflammation, which allows the body to respond with counter-inflammation. It improves the metabolic state and glucose utilization. It improves both the muscle mass and the muscle strength, and it improves the cardiac function. The pro-inflammatory cytokines are decreased, anti-inflammatory cytokines are increased. The contractility of vessels and formation of new blood vessels with perfusion of the periphery is improved. And with all these, the mitochondrial biogenesis and mitochondrial dynamics are improved. There is decreased oxidative stress, and improved longevity. So mitochondria are not just the powerhouse of the cell. They are the key microcosmic regulator of the macrocosmic health and disease. A healthy human body produces its own body weight in ATP at rest each day. Can you imagine an average 70 kilo adult is producing 70 kilos of ATP at rest every day? At maximal exercise, this can increase to up to 1 kilo per minute. Now, this means that the average cell count of about 1,000 to 2,500 mitochondria have to constantly keep working because ATP cannot be stored. Mitochondria occupy about 25% of the cellular volume, and brain uses about 70% of body's energy supply. So we find that mitochondrial dysfunction is quite faithfully correlated with neurodegenerative diseases. Now, exercise is one thing, but there are some essential nutrients that help in ATP production and hence help protect the mitochondria. So beta oxidation of fats kya help karta hai? The riboflavin, niacin, and coenzyme Q10. What are the key molecules, atoms needed in citric acid cycle? Iron, manganese, and magnesium. Vitamins B1, 2, 3, glutathione and cysteine, lipoate and ALA. In the electron transport chain, it's coenzyme Q10, NAD, FAD, and magnesium. All these are essential for good mitochondrial health. This is just what is happening inside the mitochondria, between the outer membrane and the inner membrane. So what are the factors associated with mitochondrial damage? And can you reverse it? जब इतना काम कर रहा है mitochondria, occasionally the oxidants and the free radicals can leak out during ATP production. There is, with aging, cumulative oxidative damage to mitochondrial DNA also. This has been linked with ApoE4 genomic susceptibility. And if you remember, हमने ApoE4 को भी touch किया था a few weeks ago as one of those factors which might be protecting Asian populations because we have ApoE3 and not E4. Toxic metals, organic pollutants, even some prescription drugs can cause mitochondrial aging. Alcohol and some recreational, what are they called? Psychoactive agents, recreational psychoactive agents can cause mitochondrial aging, including cocaine, by the way. So drugs that cause damage of mitochondria are even unregulated, uncontrolled acetaminophen, definitely antibiotics, at some level aspirin, azathioprine, indomethacin, I refer to cocaine, L-dopa, statins, and griseofulvin-like antifungals. The 8-OHDG in urine can measure the degree of mitochondrial damage, and it seems like an easy test to do. I have never gotten this done, but it was interesting that you can monitor mitochondrial damage by checking the 8-OHDG in the urine. The indirect measures of mitochondrial dysfunction are raised blood pyruvate and blood lactate levels. Direct measure seems to be 8-OHDG in urine, which is predictive of the amount of DNA damage. And hence, probability of cancer. So 8-OHDG has been used by oncologists to kind of create that, bystander evidence of malignancy in the body. If we look at association of mitochondrial dysfunction, we find that it is about 98% associated with graying of hair, about 93% with muscle weakness. So it's mitochondrial aging dysfunction is a direct correlate of aging. And it is also found in a lot of chronic health problems, including anxiety, ischemic heart disease, cardiac arrhythmias, diabetes mellitus, Parkinsonism, neuropathies, even cataract. So mitochondrial function and promoting mitochondrial health seems to be a good long-term health objective. How can you do that? Pick the right mother. So all mitochondrial DNA comes from your mother, and you can't do that. So this is just on a lighter note, but optimize your nutrition. Coenzyme Q10, alpha lipoic acid, acetyl N-carnitine, resveratrol, N-acetylcysteine, vitamin E, all of them, ginkgo biloba, all of them, and also melatonin, are promoters of good mitochondrial function. Decrease exposure to toxins. Do use parasympathetic means to detoxify. And here I would like to say extreme measures are themselves toxic. Become responsible about antibiotic use and antibiotic prescription. Antibiotics are not prasad के जो भी आता है उसको देनी है या जो भी लेता है उसको promote करनी है. We need to have a good antibiotic stewardship program, a responsible nationwide antibiotic stewardship, because antibiotics are significant triggers for mitochondrial dysfunction. Recreational drugs, alcohol, all cause oxidative damage. They should be limited or even eliminated if we are looking at long-term good health. Antioxidants like coenzyme Q10, ALA, and acetyl L-carnitine, resveratrol, NAC, vitamin E, and melatonin are protective and can be used according to your own preferences. But the biggest one is exercise. Strength training improves mitochondrial function even in Parkinson's disease. Supportive supplements and nutraceuticals like ginkgo biloba are all found to be mitochondrial protective. Excuse me. So mitohormesis is when you trigger that little bit of mitochondrial stress, which produces increased mitochondrial mass and function. The plant antioxidants and polyphenols or nutraceuticals improve mitochondrial reserve and decrease mitochondrial oxidative damage. Intermittent fasting and calorie restriction are very strong triggers for mitochondrial health. Exercise also improves, we have seen, mitochondrial function. Redox optimized ROS balance. This is the measure of mitochondrial ATP generation being maximized and the free radical being minimized with maximal respiratory rate. So the more you raise your respiratory rate during activity, less is the oxidative damage, because mitochondria are upping their game to improve the production of ATP. Proton gradients in mitochondria are uncoupled from ATP generation by the uncoupling molecules. These suppress inflammasome and increase longevity. This is a direct effect of exercise. So mitochondria not only help you to live a better, more energetic life, but also improve your energy uptake and insulin sensitivity. I think if there is one message that I want to leave all of you with is, you have to take action today. And that is not just, a mental action. Act, move your muscles, exercise a little every single day. Because this seesaw of metabolic inflammation and counter-inflammation needs us to hormetically challenge our body towards a healthier counter-inflammatory lifestyle. I do have something to say here about whatever I've seen happening in the last week or so. And it's something जो मुझे थोड़ा at a psychological level भी trouble कर रहा था. What I feel is that, any disease control program ends when that disease is termed as ended. Who is driving the persistent focus on persistent disease accumulation in COVID-19? What is the narrative that is being built around it? I feel that it is our responsibility, and even so, more so, our duty, to not let narratives, politics, economics, and polarization drive the way we examine the world or we see the world. They should not be allowed to take over the narrative. Examine each fact, use your faculties, use your training, be open to the scientific method. We should be open to inquiry. We should even be open to being proved wrong. तर्क वितर्क और कॉन्वर्सेशन को सच्चा रखना हमारा परम धर्म होना चाहिए. It's not just our need, it is the imperative of the world today, because tomorrow all this is going to be read, followed, and judged by our coming generations. Tark is logic, vitark is applied knowledge, and that is what should be driving the conversation. हम भीड़ नहीं हैं. We are thinking, trained, logical, scientific, breathing human beings who must continue to speak our own truth so that that also can be recorded in history. Simply because कोई ज़्यादा ऊंचा बोलता है या ज़्यादा देर तक बोलता रहता है and they can scream louder and longer does not make their speech the only or the ultimate truth. Gently and consistently, we must continue to examine our truth. We must continue to speak our examined truth and do this with sincerity. We can only do that much. And then we should let the history and the future decide what was correct and what was incorrect. और मैं थोड़ी philosophical जरूर हो गई हूँ इसमें, but I thought this was something that I needed to say today.
Brilliant points put forward by Dr. Nidhi today, yet again, I must say, and a great discussion on the mitochondrial dysfunction and the diseases that bring with it. We were discussing last week about how we are basically moving towards a better lifestyle and a healthier lifestyle, and we have to see it at at the holistic level. And this is yet another insight into achieving that. So we would now open the floor to questions. If there's anyone who would like to discuss something, we can do that now.
I think there is a question about booster doses.
Correct.
So my take is that examine the facts according to your knowledge. Boosters do provide short-term protection, but that protection is indeed just that, short-term. When you are seeing rising number of cases and rising at an alarming rate, boosters may be justified. But when you are seeing an endemicity, low-lying, periodic excursions above the baseline, boosters don't make scientific sense for everybody and universally. They may make some sense for targeted population groups. अगर आपकी जरूरत है कि आपको ट्रैवल करना है और आप ट्रैवल ही नहीं कर सकते विदाउट द बूस्टर, टेक इट. अगर आपको कोमॉर्बिडिटीज हैं and there are no other ways in which you can prevent exposure, take it. But repeated boosting is going to cause immunosenescence also. So be mindful of the fact that you have to trust your own immune system to do what it does best. Be trained. And over the past several tens of thousands of years, we have been doing just that. Encountering new pathogens, getting trained, and dealing with them.
Madam, is there any role of the genes on our mitochondria?
What genes?
Our genes.
So mitochondria are inherited from the mother entirely. And your maternal health is the best predictor of how healthy you will be in terms of your mitochondrial health. The mitochondrial genes are also very highly conserved. In fact, कुछ hypotheses ऐसे हैं कि mitochondria शायद जब हम multicellular बन रहे थे तो कुछ ऐसे बैक्टीरिया हैं जो हमने internalize कर लिए हैं, and they are the ones driving our metabolism, and this is a symbiotic relationship. But the mitochondrial genes and DNA are predictors of oxidative health, telomere length, and aging.
Madam, you have talked about the role of the ivermectin in the many viral diseases, like Japanese encephalitis and many other diseases. What are the dose of the ivermectin in this disease?
No, I'm not right now actually talking about any dosing. All I'm saying is कि perspective right होना चाहिए. Ivermectin की pharmacology ऐसी है कि वो जिन cellular targets पर काम करता है, वो cellular targets antiviral हैं. And just being driven by a screaming match outside that, this doesn't work and you don't know your facts if you're saying so. I mean, you should examine the science and then deal with it, because I'm not even talking about dosing here. I'm only talking about what needs to be put right for history.
And Madam, what is the meaning of the mitohormesis?
Hormesis is कि आप जब उसको थोड़ा सा ट्रिगर करते हैं तो बॉडी उसको काउंटर करने के लिए एक एंटी इन्फ्लेमेटरी एक्शन करती है. And this is what keeps us in good health. If there is no trigger, if we do not exercise, then our bones become weak, our muscles lose their mass. But if we exercise, the body triggers through the inflammatory markers that become available, increased bone density as well as increased muscle mass. If you take it beyond a certain level, if you do not offer the body chance to recover, then this becomes counterproductive. So it follows a sort of rising and then falling curve of decreased usefulness beyond the critical point. That is hormesis. And in the mitochondria also you will have the same dynamics working. अगर आप थोड़ा सा एक्सरसाइज करते हैं तो एटीपी की डिमांड इंक्रीज होती है, माइटोकॉन्ड्रिया उस डिमांड को पूरी करने के लिए ज्यादा काम करते हैं. लेकिन अगर आप माइटोकॉन्ड्रिया को रिकवर करने का टाइम नहीं देते हैं और एक्सेसिव काम करने से ऑक्सीडेटिव आयंस एंड एटीपी लीकेज होती है, तो माइटोकॉन्ड्रियल हेल्थ अफेक्ट होती है. So it has to be just the right amount. In fact, you know, when you see all these professional athletes, you have been reading some news of otherwise so-called fit people dying of heart attacks. You realize that they don't follow the hormetic principle. They are over taxing their body.
And madam, what is the cause of the thymic atrophy?
वो तो एज रिलेटेड है ना.
Age related.
Yes, Kiran ma'am, आपका शायद माइक.
I have a question that I just read in one of your screen shots that aspirin, statins, they damage mitochondria. So we all are taking.
In the long term. In the long term. You have to do the balance ना, कि हमारा कोलेस्ट्रॉल ज्यादा डैमेज. मैम वही बोल रही हूँ. मैम एक मिनट. आपको ये देखना है कि हाँ एग्जैक्टली. एंड इफ यू आर टेकिंग इट बिकॉज यू नीड इट, इट इज अ डिफरेंट थिंग. इफ यू आर टेकिंग इट जस्ट बिकॉज यू आर टेकिंग इट, देन इट इज अ डिफरेंट थिंग. सो अगर आपको क्लॉटिंग कैस्केड मार्कर्स दिख रहे हैं तो आपको एंटी क्लॉटिंग चाहिए. लेकिन अगर आपको वो नहीं दिख रहे हैं तो जस्ट फॉर द सेक ऑफ टेकिंग एस्पिरिन, एस्पिरिन शुड नॉट बी टेकन. अगर आपको दिख रहा है कि आपका कोलेस्ट्रॉल डैमेजिंग लेवल्स पर है तो आपको स्टैटिन्स चाहिए. अगर आप देख रहे हो कि आपका कोलेस्ट्रॉल अंडर कंट्रोल है और आप फिर भी लिए जा रहे हो तो नहीं लेने चाहिए. So this is what I'm saying, that we need to bring some logic into the narrative of whatever we prescribe and whatever we take.
We are taking it as, since we are have comorbidity, hypertension, diabetes, so we are taking it as anticoagulant as well as anti-inflammatory preventive dose 75 वो लेते हैं और 10 milligram rosuvastatin लेते हैं.
हाँ, और आप बहुत और चीजें और भी करते हैं. आप थोड़ी सी एक्सरसाइज करते हैं, आप उससे अपनी जनरल हेल्थ इंप्रूव करते हैं, आप पानी खूब पीते हैं, उससे अपनी ब्लड विस्कोसिटी कम करते हैं. सो you know, I'm not the authority on this, so I cannot tell you. I can only present the facts to you and allow you to make the decisions for yourself. But I have seen patients who have been taking unmonitored aspirin for years and years together, who come back with nasal bleeds and who even come back with gastrointestinal bleeds. And when we tell them that you need to stop it, the physicians do resist it. And aspirin up to a level is actually protective for atherosclerosis, but so is exercise. So rather than depending, rather than depending only on synthetic, unmonitored chemicals into the body, we should be looking at a more parasympathetic. And I know this would trigger a lot of people. मुझे पता था, but so we need to see whether we need it. बहुत सारी चीजें ऐसी होती हैं कि जो हम एक बार ही शुरू करते हैं और हम लेते चले जाते हैं. और सर हमेशा कहते थे कि जिस चीज की जरूरत नहीं है वो नहीं करो.
नहीं, जरूरत है तो ले, प्रिवेंटिव डोज ले।
मैम आपने अपना लास्ट कोलेस्ट्रॉल कब चेक किया?
कोलेस्ट्रॉल ये सारा प्रोफाइल तो मैं करवाती रहती हूँ।
कब किया? कब किया?
ये तो बहुत जरूरी है।
और मैम कब किया था? लास्ट कब किया था?
लास्ट तो किया था ये सारा अपना, ये मेरे को हुआ था ना, कोविड हुआ था मुझे अबाउट 9 months बैक, सो 7-8 months बैक, तब सारा प्रोफाइल कराया था।
और आप स्टैटिन्स कब से ले रहे हो? और उस टाइम पर आपका कोलेस्ट्रॉल कैसा था?
कोलेस्ट्रॉल मेरा, इफ आई डोंट टेक स्टैटिन तो इट गोज टू 250 260, और ट्राइग्लिसराइड चला जाता है, ट्राइग्लिसराइड हाई हो जाता है, तो उसकी वजह से। और एलडीएल को बहुत स्ट्रेस करते हैं आजकल कि एलडीएल शुड नॉट बी मोर देन 100 सो एलडीएल हाई हो जाता है अगर स्टैटिन नहीं लूं। अगर स्टैटिन लेती हूँ तो फिर सब कुछ ठीक रहता है। 10 milligram रोज़ोवास्टैटिन and ecosprin.
So ma'am, I would say, and I think Meenakshi will be able to contribute a little more here because she's a physician. What I would say is कि अगर मेरे पास कोई पिछले 15-20 साल से एस्पिरिन लेते हुए आता है और उसको नोज ब्लीड्स हो रहे हैं, the first thing I will do is stop his aspirin.
हाँ, 15-20 साल से ले रहे हैं,
or at least reduce it. And I know that aspirin is protective and hence should be continued for people who need it. Antibiotics should also be given to people who need it. So we have to become logical about our prescribing and consuming habits.
Madam, you have mentioned about the melatonin. So what is
Yes.
the dose of melatonin, and is to be taken either synthetically or naturally? For how long?
Melatonin is given in the dose of 3 to 6 milligram, even 10 milligram at night. The natural ways to boost melatonin are far superior and far preferable to taking synthetic melatonin. However, synthetic melatonin is not different from natural melatonin. The easiest way to boost melatonin is to follow the circadian principle. If after waking up within the first 15 to 20 minutes, half an hour, you see bright light, that is, you go outdoors and you move forward, that is, you are just walking, melatonin surge happens about 10 to 12 hours after this initial exposure to natural light, which is the way the body is supposed to function. If, on the other hand, at that time, that 10 to 12 hours later, you expose the body to artificial light, your computer screens, TV screens, phone screens, artificial lighting inside the house, the melatonin secretion gets suppressed. So you are disturbing the normal circadian rhythm, in which case you will need to boost the melatonin artificially. So the easiest way that I see is to, and I have lost that battle. I am guilty. The easiest way that I see is कि dinner के बाद TV, computer, phone नहीं देखना. आपको 2 घंटे में अपने आप नींद आ जाएगी. अगर आप डिनर के बाद टीवी, फोन और कंप्यूटर स्क्रीन पर हो तो आप जागे रहोगे, और जितना आप करोगे उतना मेलेटोनिन सप्रेस होगा. So 2 hours of exposure reduces melatonin by 50%, natural melatonin. And I'm saying I'm guilty. I took this challenge upon myself in March, that March is going to be my sleep fixing month. I lost that battle. But I'm still hopeful. I'm still on it.
Ma'am, the way to do it is to get up early. No matter what time you sleep, just get up early, and then that will fix everything. And that is what has worked for me. I am now for the I think 4 months in a row, I'm getting up at 6. So I automatically wind up quick, and I'd make it a point not to, of course, rest in the day. So I mean, that's the only, in my opinion, in my,
No, absolutely, you're correct. But just
there-
for instance, ye presentation,
yeah,
I finished it at 2 o'clock. So what I'm saying is that, sometimes you're right. Sometimes we let life get in the way. This could easily have been done by 8 o'clock.
So no, so the thing is that there are times when even I have to sleep till 2, but then I make it a point to wake up at 6 that day. So then the
Yes.
vicious cycle that we get into.
Yes.
So in my little small wisdom, whatever I have, I think that is the way to break it. And I have been a night owl for all my life. I won't even say most of my life. I've been a night owl.
I think most of us, right? I mean, as doctors, we pride ourselves in being able to survive on less sleep and
In doctors, yes.
inhuman hours.
Yes. And in fact, I think I think all of us have spent, 3 days with just 5 hours of sleep and 7 hours of sleep. We've all done that in our MBBS days. But, the sooner you realize that getting up early in the morning is important, the better it is. I think it's really, you have so much time in the day, even though the number of hours are the same, but still you are more efficient. So I think that is the way to break it, to just make sure, fix one time. या तो सोने का time fix कर लो या फिर उठने का time fix कर लो, and then that
Yes.
cycle sort of takes place. Yes, Dr. Wadhwa, you would like to say something?
Yeah, I think I agree with Dr. Nidhi in regards to the LDH levels, as she's mentioned the side effects on the mitochondria. There is no harm in stopping the statins for a while, and while you are monitoring your cholesterol profile. And if you think it is constantly, LDH is below 70, and even if you are having a coronary thrombosis, there is no harm in stopping it, and you monitor your LDL level and cholesterol levels, and then you go accordingly. You can restart it. And even if it is constantly normal, there is no harm. There is no need for taking statin. This is what I feel.
Thank you, sir.
that would only take, so most of the Indian population, they do, if you see that, the premenopausal women and the postmenopausal women, you will see that their cholesterol levels would be towards the higher side. So, invariably, when someone comes to you with a cholesterol level of 200 and then they're 200 and their LDL super high, and you would start it, and I agree with Dr. Wadhwa that we would monitor it, and we would if it comes down without medication, then that's the best case scenario. But the Indian population at large is just generally lazy. I mean, at least the people who come to come to the OPD, they are generally lazy. They don't want to exercise. They just want magic pills that will cure all the reports. They don't want to cure themselves. They just want to cure the reports, and that's.
No, I think the healthy lifestyle is the most important point as far as metabolic syndrome is concerned.
Yes.
As well as these cholesterols and blood sugar levels are concerned. But unfortunately, we depend more on medicine rather than going for exercise.
Yes, of course.
I think unless there is a family inheritance, they are prone to have coronary thrombosis. That's a different story. But generally, it's not the case. It is our food which is causing problem.
Absolutely.
We have to go for it.
Absolutely. So, in all the prescriptions, I usually see that, whenever a doctor writes, they always write exercise, walk, it's always written, but those are the points that are ignored, and they just go straight to the medicines, the 1, 2, 3, wherever we've written the names of the medicines. That's the only part that the patient even attempts to read. So, that's unfortunate. And I wish that we could start this anti-inflammatory lifestyle movement, but we not as influential as Dr. KK. So he did attempt to do that when he started the CRT.
Thanks to Dr. Nitin, she pointed out that damage to the mitochondrial, and I think it's a job of the patient as well as the physician. If it is getting normal in successive readings of the lipid profile, Why not stop it and check it again, and then you can always see general condition of the patient and restart again. What is wrong? It's not that you, as long as you monitor, matter finish.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
Yes.
Madam, you have mentioned about the alcohol.
Yes.
To avoid the alcohol as is inflammatory. But
Yes.
for the heart disease, many doctors prescribe the alcohol. What is your opinion?
So this is all hormetic, by the way. अगर आप अल्कोहल को ओवर यूज करोगे तो अल्कोहल इज अ वेरी सीरियस ऑक्सीडेटिव स्ट्रेस ऑन द बॉडी. And Meenakshi has something to say. I saw her expression.
Yeah, so I mean, the permissible limit is 2 units, and it's very easy to go overboard because it is addictive. So there we have to, so as you mentioned, hormesis has to be taken care of. It's an addictive substance, and it's very easy to overuse it. So we have to be careful about it. There are toxic effects on the liver even with that 2 permissible limits. So everyone they have to be there are so many other things than alcohol which can be good for your heart. So why not try that?
Including a little bit of exercise.
Absolutely.
And from personal experience, I can tell you that, since I started my fitness journey, my mental health, physical health to alag hi cheez hai, but my mental health has never been better. The physical parameters, my fasting insulin levels are rock bottom low. So physical health is also good. I think if there is one message that you can give to everybody, even if you're doing that 6-minute walk test, you're doing exercise.
Yes. So 150 minutes we divided it and it came to 21 minutes per day. And I said 21 minutes means 6 minutes to 6-minute walk test hi ho gaya, din mein 2 baar kar rahe ho, it's 12 minutes. So you just have to exercise for a little bit longer or walk for a little bit longer, and you're done with that daily quota, at least for the fitness level. For weight loss, of course, we can increase that.
Yeah.
Fitness, that 21 minutes that we require, that's already taken care of if you're doing the 6-minute walk test. Right. So,
Madam, I think that the mitochondria is the soul of our body. What is your opinion?
I agree. I absolutely agree. And we owe it to our mothers.
There's a question here about the markers of mitochondrial health and what to measure for it.
So I did mention that indirect measures are pyruvate and lactate.
Yeah.
But the direct measure is that OH, 8-OH DCG, which I haven't used and I don't know. This is what my reading has told me. We can find out the labs which are doing that.
Right. So I think that we can take that as the last question for the day. Great session about our mothers and our mitochondria. Thank you so much, Dr. Nidhi, for doing this with us. And big thank you to all of you for joining in, keeping this show alive and motivating us to do better each week. Your attendance really means a lot. So thank you for joining in. We'll be back again next week. Until then, goodbye.